Kia ora. The Rotorua Library Heritage and Research Team would like to present a snapshot of the Rotorua Library Archive. An archive is made up of temporary records created by individuals and organisations and kept for their long-term value. These records provide evidence of past actions and help communities to flourish and become established. These records also contain information on a range of topics like education, entertainment, and tourism. The format of material range from handwritten documents to photographs, audio files, and scrapbooks. A community archive preserves the memory of the history of the community in which it is located. The role of this archive is to support people in accessing the records and to look after the records using best practice preservation techniques. Rotorua Library has a community archive. The archive contains a collection of primary sources about local Rotorua groups, organisations, clubs and businesses, as well as the papers of individuals. The main reason that we keep these records are because of their continuing value to the Rotorua Library and the Rotorua community. Our role is to preserve, manage and provide access to material related to the history of Rotorua and Te Arawa. The library accepts mainly printed material, but will consider other formats if space and conditions allow. Objects are not normally accepted, for example, a cup, a piece of furniture, or a garment. Priority is given to material about Rotorua and Te Arawa people, places, and events. Geothermal, timber and forestry, civic matters, and tourism. Each donation is considered on a case-by-case basis. The process of accepting material starts with an initial meeting to discuss the possible donation and finishes in accepting the donation. Please contact a member of the Heritage and Research Team to have that initial discussion. Graeme will now talk about the Ngongotaha Scout Hall donation.
In 1991, the Ngongotaha Scout Committee realised that the committee had little or no idea about the history of how the group acquired the Scout Hall building. Janine Sherlock set out to research and wrote this history on the Ngongotaha Scout Hall. It was her research that was donated to the Library Archives in September 1999 that makes up this particular record. As part of her research, Sherlock conducted interviews with local residents. The research began with William James Batchelor. Bill Batchelor, or Uncle Bill as he was known to Scouts, has been credited with starting up the Scouts in Ngongotaha. Batchelor was interviewed at his Ngongotaha Road home on the 31st of May 1991, when he was 93 years old. Bill and his wife Mona and their next-door neighbour Mrs. Sinclair both each had a son keen to join the Scouts. The first meeting of the Ngongotaha Boy Scouts Committee was held on the 13th of February 1933. When Sherlock began, the Scout Group Committee's records consisted of 2 minute books. The archive holds these 2 minute books, which cover the period from February 1973 to February 1992. These 2 lecture books hold 19 years of history that could easily have been lost if not preserved. During this project, an old Durham exercise book was handed in. This was the first minute book, covering the early years from 1933 to 1947, and was a very valuable resource providing background information. If this research project was not undertaken back in 1991, this minute book may never have come to light. Also tucked inside the minute book was a type sheet of events relating to the hall from May 1961 to May 1962. Sherlock was unable to determine the original source of this page. As well as conducting interviews, Sherlock wrote letters to the national headquarters of the Scout Association of New Zealand, National Archives, many museums and government bodies, such as the Department of Survey and Land Information and Electricity Corporation of New Zealand. Sherlock collated her original research material in a clear file, which the Rotorua Library Archive now holds. This acquisition also includes a Ngongotaha Scout scarf and some old scouting publications, including Jungle Law, published in 1957, a patrol book titled Our Founder, published in 1955, and a souvenir booklet for the 1987 40th anniversary reunion of the 1947 Sixth World Jamboree held in France. While these do not directly relate to the history of the Ngongotaha Scout Hall, they do provide some additional history on the scouting movement. So did Sherlock find the answers she was looking for? Bill Batchelor was working in the bush alongside Harry Boudoir, who told Bill about an old meeting house on his land at Awaho that he was wishing to sell. The Scout Committee purchased the building for £250 with a cost of £50 to shift it. To raise the money, parents went around the district collecting donations which ranged from £1 to £5. A boxing tournament fundraiser was held at the Lyric Theatre. The group also received a grant from the then Labour government. Bill was a Labour supporter. To quote Bill, he hit up Prime Minister Peter Fraser, who was in Rotorua for an opening ceremony. This was the opening of the Janet Fraser Memorial Guest House, which was opened on the 28th of August 1948. Using the Rotorua Library microfiche newspaper records, Sherlock found 2 articles regarding the shifting of the building in January 1949. One was a tender for the building removal, which means the shift most likely occurred during March 1949. The hall was dismantled and shifted from Awaho to Western Road. The land the hall was rebuilt on was a swamp. The hall was put on the only solid land there, and the swamp was filled in with sawdust from Fletcher's Mill. The hall has had to be moved again on at least 2 occasions due to flooding from the Ngongotaha stream. Harry Boudoir had removed any significant Mauri carvings. A small carving from the building was given to Mary Mills, who was the secretary of the local Rotorua Boy Scouts Association. This was later made into the Mary Mills Shield, which is presented to the patrol gaining the most points for camping ability. There was also a centre pole in the hall, but this was pulled down to make more room for activities. Further changes to the building occurred in the late 1950s when the golf club room was moved and added onto the hall to become the kitchen and toilets. The exact circumstances as to why Boudoir sold the family meeting house is unknown. Sherlock has suggested that the building was falling into disrepair and was being used by local children for playing in. By moving it to Ngongotaha, it could continue as a meeting place for the wider community and be a place where children would still play. Now here is Trish to tell you the story of pilot and flight instructor Pauline Russell.
This archive is Pauline Russell's flying logbooks, which record the flying history of Mrs. P.G. Russell. I was very fortunate in that I had the opportunity to meet Pauline a few weeks ago to gather further information for this presentation. Born in May 1921, Mrs. Russell's flying interest began while on a family holiday with her husband and children in Matamata in 1962. She watched the gliders being flown and decided she'd like to have a go. However, the time taken driving from Rotorua to Matamata for glider lessons, along with car troubles, got her considering flying a powered plane, which she could do more easily in Rotorua. One of her daughters told me that someone crashed the only glider in Rotorua, and she decided that as she was over 40, she'd best change to powered engines rather than waiting for it to be repaired. So, in 1963, aged 42, Pauline wandered off to the Rotorua Aerodrome to learn to fly single-engine planes. In those days, the aerodrome was at Fenton Park, where Glen Bray is now situated. Married, with 5 daughters, 2 of whom had left home, Pauline persisted, gaining her private pilot's licence in 1965. Her husband, Geoffrey Charles, supported Pauline by helping with cooking and raising the younger girls while running his grocery store. In 1965, the family moved to Tauranga, where Pauline continued her flying with the Tauranga Aero Club. In 1969, Pauline was cleared for night flying operations. 1970 saw her gain her commercial pilot's licence. Although Pauline didn't aspire to fly commercially, in those days it wasn't even a possibility. This was a man's world. She also remembers the looks on some faces when a charter group discovered the pilot was a woman. She then spent a year studying to qualify as a flying instructor in 1971. By now, Pauline was 50 and a grandmother of 3, but she didn't stop there. Her next qualification was for an instrument rating, the first woman in New Zealand civil aviation history to do so. This is a level of expertise required of a commercial pilot entering one of the national airlines. Pauline had no desire for that though. She loved learning and bettering her flying ability. In February 1971, Pauline entered an instrument flying competition in Nelson. In talking with family, I discovered that Pauline also flew to Norfolk Island, probably with others, which was the in thing to do in the 1970s. Having her instrument rating would have allowed this. When a vacancy as a flight instructor at Rotorua Era Club came up in 1973, she took the job, commuting from Tauranga daily, which she did for 6.5 years. This was what Pauline loved, training and teaching people to fly, then letting them go on their first solo flight knowing they could do it and do it well. On the screen is shown one of Pauline's sketches for a student explaining a flying circuit. Pauline did describe some of these students to me. Lads with knocking knees, partly from having a woman instructor and partly from learning to fly. When I met Pauline to talk about her flying days, several stories came up. Flying a float plane to rescue someone from the middle of Lake Rotorua. Doing rescue missions, flying and picking up a patient and bringing them back to Rotorua Hospital. Sharing an office with Fred Ladd. Looking through her logbooks revealed she was involved in a police search, forest survey, photography and fish spotting among her scenic charter flights. Another highlight for Pauline was time spent in Christchurch as a guest of the RNZAF. A trip to Woodburn near Blenheim in 1974 resulted in the opportunity to fly an RNZAF Harvard training plane, which is an American World War II plane. When I looked through her flying logs for this, I found an entry for spinning, aerobatics such as loops, barrel rolls, slow rolls and starting turns. I thought I'd close with a quote from this article about Pauline from the Bay of Plenty Times, 23rd of May 1973. Pauline states, "I've got woman's liberation well inbred," describing how her aunt had fought with the suffragettes to obtain the vote for women in Britain and had been jailed in 1914. She used to keep a catapult up her bloomer leg and fire lead pellets made by my grandfather from a double-decker bus. Pauline didn't need to smash any windows, but I think you'll agree she smashed through a few glass ceilings. And now Alison will speak about the Rotorua and District Rose Society.
So here is the Rotorua and District Rose Society Incorporated. The society was formed in 1949 and incorporated in 1964, and it continued as a club in Rotorua until 2002. The program shown here states that in 1999 it is their golden anniversary. This was printed for the National Rose Show, which was held in Rotorua for the first time in 10 years. So here we have the Rotorua Photo News. These photographs show just some of the events held by the Society. On this occasion in 1963, Rose expert Sam McGrady was a guest judge. On this occasion, a concert was held at the conclusion of Rose Week. He is pictured here with the St Faith's concert party, Reverend Bennett and the Mayor Mauri Linton. And on the right we have Choosing the Rose Princess 1965 and a lovely bevy of young ladies vying for the crown. The Society grew in member numbers and turned their attention to hosting the Rose Convention every year from 1955. The final show was being held at St Mary's Church Hall in 2001. The Society held regular pruning demonstrations for the general public, often at the Murray Linton Rose Gardens in Fenton Park. Mayor Murray Linton was also the Society's Vice President in 1955 and President in 1957. Don Butcher, as seen here in the article from the Rotorua Review, was also a council department manager. He was responsible for the library and was a great supporter of the expansion and new building for the library in 1991. He retired from council in 1997 and then took on president of the Society from 1998. It was Don's wife, Anne, who donated this archive to the library in 2002. Here we have a selection of items from the archive collection. We have a show booklet, a newsletter, and a blank certificate which was used for the Premier Awards. And finally, some more photo news. We have the winners here of the 1968 show. Mrs. Lapwood, who was the wife of the then MP for Rotorua, Harry Lapwood, officially opened the show. The champion rose was won by Mrs. Aldridge. And on the right, you'll see that there are children's competition winners for Best Rose. And now I'd like to introduce Annie, who will speak about the Rotary Club of Rotorua.
The Rotary Club of Rotorua. Rotary's founder, Paul Harris, wanted to initially create a professional group with the same friendly spirit he felt in the small towns of his youth. The first meeting was held in Chicago on the 23rd of February 1905. It has since become a global organisation. Members of Rotary work together to promote peace, fight disease, provide clean water, sanitation and hygiene, save mothers and children, support education and grow local economies. Rotary started in New Zealand in 1921 and covers New Zealand and 10 Pacific islands. One of the main reasons that people join Rotary in New Zealand is to do good in the community. The material in this donation includes meeting minutes, newsletters, and ephemera like these sample banners with fringes in royal blue, gold, and red. You can also find the certificate that recognises the club's 50th anniversary and these scrapbooks. This is a brochure from 1966 and is about the 10th Annual Rotary Conference. Accounts and correspondence are also a part of this donation. You can find a brochure on the presentation of Charter 1965 and the Register of Members book.
Thank you so much for listening to our presentation.